Welcome, welcome everybody. We're very glad to have you here. I am Kelly Roth. I am the working group facilitator, and my role is to run our meeting. You'll see emails from me also related to the surveys and also to ensure that all perspectives are heard. I think that you have probably spoken with David Fort from the Office of Insurance Commissioner. Lauren Burns also, they're both available by email outside of these meetings, and they'll put their email addresses into chat. Deanne Pritchie is also here, OIC administrator, and is the person who's going to monitor, our chat. So if you have any tech issues, Deanne is the person to send a message to. As you were joining, you saw this slide that's still up here now. This is our request to you in terms of etiquette for this working group. And you can see on here and certainly put any notes if you have any additions or edits that you'd like into the chat. If you have not already, we invite you to visit the working group website. Deanne's going to put that link into chat. If you were someone who participated in our first survey, thank you for your response. You can now see the responses on the workgroup website, and there will be another survey coming tomorrow, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in this meeting. We are recording this meeting as you saw as you came in. It will be posted to the working group website. We're also live on tvw.org. Should you have any Zoom issues, and you can also watch there for this or any of our meetings. 3 topics for our 90 minutes that we have today. First, I want you to meet the working group members and the ex officio members, And then we're going to learn from 2 experts, Steve Hawk from the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, and Dr. Lars Powell from the University of Alabama. So with that, welcome once again. Thank you for being here. And let me hand to Washington State Insurance Commissioner, Patty Kruger. Patty.
Thank you, Kelly, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Insurance Commissioner Patty Kuder, and I'm happy to be co-chairing this work group with our Commissioner of Public Lands, Dave Upthegrove. I've talked with other state leaders and I've toured their wildfire loss sites, and we can get ahead of the curve on protecting our property from wildfire loss. Washington's insurance market is doing fairly well compared to most of the country, but we have communities right now that are feeling the effects of non-renewals and cancellations. The recommendations from this work group can help them. This work group was created to provide critical recommendations on how we as a state can align our efforts to reduce property damage from wildfires. Mitigation is the clear pathway to reducing damage to our homes. Reducing damage and changing the perception of wildfire risk will increase the availability of insurance in these communities. Because without insurance, property owners run the risk of losing their most important asset, their home. Our work at the state level is even more important right now, with nearly $1 billion in resilient infrastructure grants canceled and plans to further dismantle FEMA. Every dollar invested in a FEMA mitigation program has been shown to save $8 in recovery costs. And instead, our state is assuming the burden for not only mitigation costs, but recovery costs too. And we are anticipating an additional expense of around $60 million a year to cover the shortfall for disaster recovery left by federal cuts. There's a lot of work being pushed onto our plates by this new administration, but we have community resilient programs that are already doing great work in Washington. Building on that resiliency on the community level is step number 1 in this process. Step number 2 is for the individual homeowner to take action. There are annual certification programs that are being developed that the insurance industry recognizes it can use when determining insurability. They're using wildfire mitigation science to reduce the likelihood of a home igniting by minimizing nearby fuel, using more fire-resistant building materials, and blocking embers from entering the home. I also want to have a tip of the hat to Alabama for being one of the inspirations for this work. Their insurance commissioner, Mark Fowler, is a stand-up guy, first and foremost, and his team worked with the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety on the Fortified program to provide grants to strengthen home roofs against hurricane winds. A study from the University of Alabama showed fortified homes suffered significantly less damage and required fewer insurance claims than homes built through standard methods when Hurricane Sally hit in 2020. And we are happy to be working with the IBHS on this project, and I hope we can apply the same principles used in Alabama's Fortified program here to mitigate against wildfires. I also am happy to be working with all of you on this project. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. And now I'd like to invite Commissioner Upthegrove to provide some comments.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for lending your time and talents to an important endeavor. My name is Dave Upthegrove. I'm about 6 months into my new responsibilities as Washington State Commissioner of Public Lands, where I have the honor of leading the incredible staff of 2,200 folks at the State Department of Natural Resources. And one of the first things I learned in local government was that emergency response really has 4 phases: prevention, preparation, response, and recovery. And I think we all know that it's a heck of a lot more cost effective to deal on the front end of that with prevention and preparation, not to mention averting human disaster and harm. And so at the Department of Natural Resources, we have the privilege of leading the wildfire prevention and response efforts for the state of Washington. We do that in coordination with a lot of partners, and continue to believe that investments in prevention and in preparation are critical. And increasingly, I'm anecdotally hearing the same things that I'm sure Commissioner Cooter has heard about: the growing risk of wildfires due to the need to address forest health, due to climate conditions, due to encroachments of growth. A lot of reasons that increased fire risk is putting pressure on people's ability to get homeowners insurance because of that risk. And I think all of us want to make sure that we have a healthy market and a healthy ability for people to get insured when there is risk. And if our agency can contribute to help provide more clarity around some of the standards we use, sharing data, sharing best ideas, we're excited to do that. A couple points to keep in mind. One is, as we develop recommendations through this work group, I think keeping in mind it's good to deal with just residential fortification and work, but we're doing it in a community context. And we can't lose sight of the responsibility to address the forest health and fuels reduction in these areas adjacent to homes. I think it's important to look at this collectively. And also, as the commissioner noted, the other commissioner noted, we should look for opportunities to build upon existing work. For example, our department runs the Wildfire Ready Neighbors program, which is designed to do just this. We've successfully recruited over 6,800 people to take over 34,000 individual actions to harden their properties and protect their homes. We also use federal funding, community wildfire defense grants, to work with community-based organizations on wildfire protection plans. We even have existing grant programs for residential homeowners. The challenge is the funding that we use for all that work was just dramatically reduced by the legislature, cut by $65 million. So on one hand, we have a legislative proviso asking us to explore a grant program. On the other hand, the funding for the existing grant programs in this space was largely eviscerated. So we need to make best use of the resources we have, of the programs we have, trying not to completely reinvent the wheel, because this work matters. We want people to get insurance for their homes. We want our communities to be safe. We want our lands and people to be healthy. And so the department's proud to join with Office of the Insurance Commissioner. Representing me on the work group moving forward is Robin Whitney. Will be representing the Department of Natural Resources. Robin's a strategic advisor to our state forester who brings a tremendous wealth of expertise that, quite frankly, I don't have. And Robin's going to be working closely with me. He'll be the face you see at the board meetings, but he'll be working with the leadership at the agency and representing us in this process, and looking forward to working with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, both Commissioner Cooter and Commissioner Up the Grove. Welcome. I would like to next introduce our elected officials. First, Representative Reeves, our bill sponsor.
Good afternoon, friends. It's nice to see everybody on this Tuesday afternoon. As Kelly mentioned, my name is Christine Reeves. I have the honor and the privilege of serving the 30th Legislative District in South King County Federal Way area, suburban, rural components of my district. And I'm proud to have been the legislative prime sponsor to ensure that this conversation could even be had, and looking forward to the results of it to make sure that we are working hard to first and foremost put homeowners who are at the highest risk of wildfire damage at the forefront of the conversation, while creating government efficiencies and maximizing the work that the Commissioner of Public Lands has already done, making sure that we're looking at statewide standards that can ensure government efficiencies and government support to help these homeowners recover after wildfire, and maximize the dollars that we are investing across the state. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for committing your time to this work. And I look forward to working with all of you over the next couple months to get to the end goal.
Thank you. Senator Short.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Super interested in this topic. Absolutely. I'm the state senator from the 7th Legislative District in the corner of northeastern Washington and a good chunk of north central Washington. I think I am just really pleased of the work that the state has done so far with a lot of partnerships in the past. Commissioner Up the Grove, you talked a great deal about those. We need to continue them. I think it's a very integral part of the discussion that we're having. I guess I know a lot of landowners are and have continued to do work on their own properties. I just want to make sure as we think of mitigation that these things are doable and achievable. And I'm really anxious to learn more about the Alabama program, but really happy to be participating. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Engel.
Thank you. Yes, Representative Engel, also from the 7th Legislative District, House counterpart to Senator Short. So our district covers 20% of the land mass of the state. Most of it's pretty dry and fire prone. A lot of constituents have had insurance cancellations and non-renewals. And so this is something I hear about. I also hear from insurance agents who are also frustrated trying to figure out how to help their customers. And so I'm excited to be part of this work group, and thanks for having me today.
Thank you. Senator Saldana.
Kelly, Senator Saldana is not in today's meeting.
Thank you. Brian Quill of the Colville Tribe.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to thank all of you guys for the invite to be a part of this meeting. I look forward to sharing some things that we have going on here and work forward towards the end goal to help the state of Washington and the members of the Colville Reservation try to figure out how to better prepare for wildland fire season and to provide insurance to our tribal membership. As we get along in this further, I can share some more information with you guys on some of the challenges that we have here on the reservation. I'm not sure if it's just particular to our reservation or if it's as a whole across Washington state for other tribes. But like I said, I can share that information with you guys, at a later time. We don't have to take up too much time now, but again, I just wanted to thank you guys for the invitation. I'm humbled to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I think that I don't think Reggie Pion of the Spokane Tribe of Indians is here. Reggie, are you here? So will join us in a future conversation. All right, so now I would like you to meet our remaining work group members. I'm going to ask you to each just share your name, your title, and your organization. Michael Newman, would you go first for us?
Yeah, hello, this is Steve Hawks with the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. Michael is not able to join this afternoon, also with IBHS, and we're happy to be a part of this prestigious group in working through such a difficult topic on how we prepare homeowners and communities for a wildfire. And IBHS, if you're not familiar, is a nonprofit organization. We conduct research on how severe weather and wildfire impacts homes and businesses, and what are the vulnerabilities to those structures, and how do we reduce those vulnerabilities so that we avoid the catastrophic loss type fires. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, and we'll hear more from Steve in just a little bit. Steve Brook.
Good afternoon, Steve Brooks. I'm the Executive Director for the Washington Fire Chiefs Association, and representing the leadership of our approximately 400 fire agencies across the state.
Thank you. Chandra Fox.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chandra Fox, Deputy Director of Emergency Management for Spokane County. I've been a professional emergency manager within Washington State for almost 30 years. This is an important conversation, and I'm very happy to be a part of it.
Thank you. Coron Polly. Oh, I can't hear you though. Corin, I'm going to keep going, and if we can get your audio fixed, we'll have you do that. Otherwise, maybe you could put your information into chat. Shannon Marbett.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shannon Marbett, and I'm with AAA Washington for our sales organization representing insurance products across Washington State. I'm the director of our service operations and training of our sales team. I'm very excited to work on this very important initiative with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Allen.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Allen. I'm the Vice President and Chief Risk Officer at Grange Insurance Association based out of Seattle. Look forward to working together with everyone on this very important topic.
Thank you. Kenton Brine.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Kenton Brine. I serve as president of the Northwest Insurance Council. We're a nonprofit trade association of property and casualty insurance companies. I work in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. I've done a lot of work in this space in other states. I'm truly excited to be working on it here in my home state. Look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move to ex officio members, I would also like you to meet Lauren Torgerson.
Good afternoon, everybody. Lauren Torgerson. I'm working with David Fort, and as a consultant, I had several years' experience in Washington State with the Department of Natural Resources, retired earlier this year. Thanks. Glad to be here.
Thank you. For our remaining ex officio members, I would ask that you type your name, your title, and your organization into the chat. We are so pleased to have you with us, and there are many of you, and so I want to make sure we get to our speakers. If you would put into the chat, please, your name, your title, and your organization. And if you are an attendee, you will see that all of the folks that are panelists, the people that you see on the screen, you either have heard from them or you will see them put something into chat at the moment. And we're very glad to have everybody with us. I'm going to move us now into our first of two presentations. And as you're going through hearing these presentations, I want you to be aware that tomorrow you'll receive a link to a survey where you can certainly add any comments, questions, additional input that you want to share. You'll get that survey link, and we encourage you to use that. The survey will be open until the end of the day, Sunday, July 6th. Work group members, you can also use the chat to share your thoughts and your questions as we go through this conversation. We expect that there might be a lot of comments, so I don't know that we will have time to hear from everyone who puts a comment in or raises their hand to speak. So that is why we have created the survey. I just wanted you to know that before we go ahead and dive into the presentation. So with that, Steve Hawks, Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, please let me hand over to you, and looking forward to hearing more from you.
Okay, can you see my screen okay? The presentation mode? Perfect, okay. Again, good afternoon, everybody. Steve Hawks, Senior Director for Wildfire at the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, or IBHS. My background is in the California Fire Service, where I had a 30-year career, 24 years in the field responding to emergencies and wildfires across the state of all types, and also then the last 6+ years working underneath the Office of the State Fire Marshal and overseeing the community and property level wildfire mitigation programs for the state of California. I did mention what we do at IBHS to look at severe weather and wildfire and the impacts to homes and businesses. And you see on the background slide, this is our research center located in Richburg, South Carolina, where we have a bank of 105 fans that are 6 feet in diameter and can blow up to 135-mile-an-hour wind through the big concrete 6-story test chamber behind that, and where we can build a full-size structure and then test it to those different perils as that structure would experience a real wildfire event. And our particular focus is really how do we significantly narrow the path from a wildfire starting to that entering into a community and becoming an urban conflagration. And so we really look at 3 specific factors that fortunately are not present together all that often. But when they are, unfortunately, they can lead to the ignition of a fire and pushing that fire into a community really quickly. And that's drought that occurs at any scale. Wind, and particularly, is the single biggest factor that leads to extreme fire behavior and can quickly push the fire into a community. And then that's the second factor. The last factor is people or the community itself, where the wildfire really transitions from a wildfire to an urban fire. So how does that occur? Well, we have the wildfire start in a wildland area, and that fire is producing flames, radiant heat, and embers. And those embers oftentimes, for the most part, are the first order of entry of the wildfire into a community. And when they land, they, in many instances, have enough energy in them to ignite the house themselves, whether it's on the outside of the house, inside the house, or fuel next to the house. While that's occurring, and embers are kind of invading the community, the flames and radiant heat and the main body of the fire is encroaching on the outer edge of the community. And through those flames and radiant heat, they can begin to ignite structures. And once structures begin to ignite in the community, that fire really transitions from a wildland fire into an urban fire, burning urban fuels. And think of those urban fuels as anything that's combustible, including homes and outbuildings, accessory dwelling units, fences, vehicles, anything that's combustible and can ignite and burn, can allow for the spread of the fire between homes and within the community. And once that starts to happen, there's 3 other factors that determine how easy it can be for that fire to transition from just an urban fire to an urban conflagration. And the first one of those is the structure density. So how closely spaced are structures to each other? The closer they are, the easier it is for flames and radiant heat of one structure that's on fire to ignite the next structure that's close by, particularly downwind. The next one is the connective fuels, or all those urban fuels that I mentioned, and do they provide a pathway for the fire to travel within the community and between homes and to ignite additional structures? And then the last item is the building materials that the homes are made out of. The more vulnerable combustible building materials that are used, the easier it is for structures to ignite from even smaller, lower intensity fires. So let's take a quick look at a couple of fires that we did, or one fire in particular that we did a post-fire analysis on, and this is the Marshall Fire in Colorado in 2021, where we had the fire burning in the grass and the upper kind of left part of the screen, and it burned over to where we have the pin dropped on the house at 2011 Emerson Lane. And through the grass and the connective fuels of the wood fence and so forth, it ignited that first house. And then that house in turn ignited the next structure, which is in that red square, and through direct flames and radiant heat. And if you look across the street, we're going to pick up on the next slide the doorbell camera video, and you see the field of vision by that orange triangle of what the doorbell camera is going to show. And so to the right-hand side of the screen, you see the first structure that was in that red box that's completely involved in fire. Structure number 2 to the right of the pillar that's on that front porch has ignited on the right-hand side of that structure because of the flames and radiant heat of the structure burning next to it. And then structure number 3 is to the left of that pillar. And I'll go ahead and start the video, and you can see that structure number 2 is on fire on the right-hand side. We also see a very small fire burning in the grass in the front yard of structure number 2. And as this speeds up, you now see the wind kind of shift and start to engulf structure number 2, and embers flowing down that road of Emerson Lane, obscuring structure number 3 from the smoke of the fire.
Steve,
Now yes.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. We're not seeing the video. I think you need to go to presenter mode.
Oh, am I? Okay,
I'm sorry about that.
let me stop sharing and go back to and make sure I got right.
I know we want to see your video.
Yeah, can you see this screen now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go back and start this video over again.
Perfect.
Okay, here we go. Can you see the video?
We see it. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for letting me know. So again, here's the structure number 2 that's starting to ignite, and now the fire is spreading across because of the wind that's pushing the fire across it towards structure number 3. And as I mentioned, you see that structure number 3 up here is kind of obscured by the smoke from the fire because of the shifting of the winds. And now the wind shifted back, and you can see structure number 3 completely clear. So it's just a good illustration that the winds within a community, even though you might have one main constant wind direction, there's a very a degree of shiftiness of the winds, even at the subparcel level. And as this video continues, you see that structure number 2 ignited structure number 3 because of the direct flames and radiant heat. And now as this winds down, the glow on the right-hand side of the screen is no longer visible. That structure has completely burned itself out. Structure number 2 has collapsed and continuing to burn itself up. And structure number 3 is now fully involved. And that all occurred in a matter of 33 minutes. So that direct structure to structure fire spread continued in this situation all the way down to where we had this road, and that caused a break, enough of a break or distance between the structures on that side of the street and the ones across the street to not allow for that structure to structure fire spread to continue. Now we know that embers will absolutely bring the fire across the street and can ignite items on that side, starting that chain reaction of structure to structure fire spread again. This next video is from a fire in Balch Springs, Texas in 2022. The fire started over on the right-hand side from someone mowing grass, caused a spark, ignited the fire in the grass. The winds and drought, and again, in this situation, push the fire from right to left into the back of this neighborhood and these homes. And this is really a good illustration because you have a bird's eye view that's pretty clear of how the fire can, once it enters into these backyards, it's really not a grass fire any longer. It's burning the fences, the shed, the vegetation that's in the yard, all the other combustible items, and led to the ignition of 9 homes and the damage of 17 additional homes in this particular fire. So it's a really good illustration of the pathways that the fire can take to travel between homes and ignite homes, leading to that conflagration unfolding. Now, we're conducting a lot of research around structure density. We know that is a significant contributing factor when you have higher density communities. And so, and this is our on the backside of our research center where we've ignited this 12 by 24 shed on the inside using cribs, wood cribs, or similar to a pallet. And we're blowing the wind from our bank of fans across that shed towards the single family home. And we're looking at all the heat that's coming across there and the embers and flames and trying to get a good grasp on that distance between structures of what's a good distance and also the orientation of the structures to each other, the materials that they're made out of, and so forth. And from that, we've been able to determine that when we had structures at a spacing of 10 feet, we always saw when that structure was ignited that it led to the ignition and was going to be a total loss of the single family home. So we in those instances, we need to really prevent the structures from igniting in the first place when we have high density housing. When we start to increase the separation distance out to around the 20-foot, 30-foot, and greater distance, we see varying levels of damage from our research. And that's where we've found that in this space, building materials really, really matter and can determine the fate of the structure. If there's more combustible items used on the exterior building materials, then you're going to see the potential total loss or total loss categories come out. But when you start to use better building materials, they have a higher probability of surviving that intensity of fire. And when you go on further than 40 feet, then we really need to make sure that homes are protected from the ember exposure because embers can travel very long distances and ignite structures and things around structures when they land. Now, also we're looking at the connective fuel piece. And when small fires caused by embers land near a home, they can ignite those combustible items, whether it's in this case the wood mulch. And if those fires are left unchecked, there's not a fire engine there to suppress those fires, then that fire can travel through direct connectivity of fuels, the wood mulch, the wood fence, plants, over to the side of the house. And even a small fire in this instance can ignite a vulnerable component of the structure like this T111 wood siding, leading to the loss of the house. But on the right-hand side, if you replace those combustible items with non-combustible versions like rock and a metal gate or fence, then a small fire will burn over to those items and self-extinguish and not reach the side of the house. And through the use of good building materials, those building materials can withstand the additional exposure from the radiant heat of those items burning nearby. And so we saw a lot of this when we did our post-fire analysis on the LA County fires, where we looked at the connectivity of fuels and in 2 different zones, the 5 feet that immediately surrounds the house, and then from 5 to 30 feet. And in the 5 foot, wherever we saw combustible items, we saw a significant number of those items igniting, leading to from minor to almost total loss of the structure, resulting from even just embers igniting those items and then igniting the house, whether it was fences, plants, synthetic lawns, trash cans is in the bottom of the middle, of the middle of the screen, and plants. And then going over to the 5 to 30 foot, looking a little bit further out and how the wildfire can burn onto the property and through connective fuels reach the home. In the upper left-hand side, we saw the fire start burn up underneath the bottom of the property, ignite that hot tub and the retaining wall that was just behind it, leading to significant damage to the structure. Fortunately, it was built with good non-combustible materials and was able to withstand that exposure from that fire. On the right-hand side, upper part of the screen, fire came up underneath again, ignited the wood deck from the bottom, and then led to all the windows of this master bedroom breaking out and the fire entering into the house. This house was defended by firefighters. Otherwise, it would have been a complete loss. On the bottom left-hand side, embers floating in and landing up against the intersection where the vertical siding of the hot tub and the concrete patio came together and accumulating, igniting the siding of the hot tub, creating a large amount of radiant heat that led to that damage on the structure there. In the bottom center, embers, I couldn't exactly determine whether they landed on the pergola or items underneath it, but led to significant damage of this structure. And then in the far right, a structure that was burning next door ignited this row of Italian cypress. So it was set up as a privacy hedge of Italian cypress, leading to the window damage that you see there. So from all of our research that we've done at our research center, as well as all the post-fire analysis, we have come up with what we call the Wildfire Prepared Home Program. And it's a set of mitigation actions that homeowners can take to meaningfully reduce the risk of their home igniting and being lost from a wildfire. And there's two levels of a designation for the program. A base level, which you see all the requirements for the base level listed in the boxes at the bottom of the screen. And they're really designed to protect a home from exposure to the embers that are produced during the wildfire. And that addresses the components that are most vulnerable to embers, like the roof line, vents, the bottom 6 inches of the siding, gutters, and so forth, and the defensible space that surrounds the house, in particular that first 5 feet. And then the second level of designation is what we call the plus level. And it adds on to the base level requirements, all the items in the blue box that are more prone to exposure from the flames and the radiant heat from a high intensity fire. And that addresses all the other components, the windows and siding and eaves and so forth. And so a homeowner can apply to this program and receive a designation from IBHS that one signifies that they've taken the right steps to meaningfully reduce the risk to their house, but is also an opportunity to open doors for them to have conversations with insurance carriers about insurance. And that was where we started with the Wildfire Prepared Home Program, as we know that that is the first step in building a resilience for a community, is addressing the individual property level risk. But it needs to happen across an entire neighborhood or community to really build resilience for a neighborhood to withstand those high intensity fires that occur on those days where we have drought and high winds and then the ignition of a fire. And so that led to the development of our second program, which we call the Wildfire Prepared Neighborhood Program. And it really, again, is to address the conflagration from unfolding. And it's based on 4 core principles. One is reducing the likelihood that a fire that burns up against the outer edge of a community through direct flames and radiant heat will ignite those homes on the outer edge, and also prepares them for the embers that will land in and near them. And then 2, as you go deeper into the community, those embers will flow over top of those homes on the outer band and land within the community. And we want to protect those homes from ignition from those embers. And then 3, we know that those embers and fire from the main fire front will ignite fires within the community. We just don't want those fires that develop to lead to that uncontrolled fire spread within the community. Well, we want to give the fire suppression resources a fighting chance to defend the community and suppress the fire. And so we're going to address that through the connectivity of fuels. And then the last core principle is if we can accomplish the first three, we can change our communities, in particular our existing communities, from being a dense fuel source that are very receptive to these high intensity fires leading to that conflagration unfolding to more of a passive fuel break, giving firefighters and fire suppression resources a better chance at defending these communities, even under those extreme conditions. And so the basic applicability for a community for the Wildfire Prepared Neighborhood Program is single family homes, duplexes, and townhouses up to 3 stories in height. 90% of the structures within that defined boundary of the community need to have a separation distance of at least 10 feet and less than 100 feet. That's kind of the sweet spot, if you will, for this designation program to be applicable. And then all of the homes have to have a Class A fire rated roof. So from that, we divide the community up into 8 sectors. And we're going to look outside that community's boundary at the fuel that surrounds it, both the natural vegetation as well as maybe there's another neighborhood that's next door, housing development that abuts this community. We're going to look at that community, at those houses as a fuel source that could ignite and expose the community that we're looking at to that fire. And so we're going to look out a quarter mile and look at those fuel sources and for the potential for the flames and the radiant heat to burn into the outer edge of the community. And then we're going to look out 4 1/4 miles and look at the fuel types and what fuel types can lead to the lofting of embers into the air, traveling long distances and landing within the community. And our design wind speed for this is a 70-mile-an-hour wind. And once we've completed that analysis, we're going to draw a line, and you can see it kind of coming around here. And that is the line, and you can see it drops down a little bit here. It's a little bit smaller, and there is no line over on this side. And that's based on the fuel analysis that we did. Over here, we have a roadway that separates this community from the one that's across the street. So we don't feel that because of the roadway, flames can directly enter into this community. But wherever flames can directly enter, whatever parcel they touch, then that parcel needs to be built to the Wildfire Prepared Home Plus level designation to withstand flames, radiant heat, and the ember exposure. As we go deeper into the community, wherever embers can land, then those homes need to be built to the Wildfire Prepared Home base level to withstand that ember exposure. So we define 2 boundaries within the community, the neighborhood flame zone and the neighborhood ember zone. And then we're also going to take a look inside the community at the connected fuel pathways. And for the most part, when homes are built to either the Wildfire Prepared Home Plus or base level, those connected fuel pathways will already have been addressed and not allow for the spread of the fire within the community with ease, at least. So once we can start to reduce structures from igniting, then we can reduce the likelihood of conflagration. And when we can reduce the likelihood of conflagration, we can increase the survivability of homes, and then we can increase the insurability of homes. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, so I'm just looking at our time here. We'll spend maybe 5 minutes on questions and comments. And also, I want to remind you that there is, if you're a working group member, the survey is being emailed you tomorrow. So if you don't have a chance to speak up or ask a question here, there's another way to share your input. And for anybody listening who's an attendee, you can find the link to that survey on the website tomorrow. Commissioner Kuderer.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I found it very helpful. A question for you though, has IBHS considered looking into wildfire smoke mitigation with all the issues that we have seen coming out of California?
We have not. We focus on the vulnerabilities to homes from the wildfire itself, not the smoke vulnerability, and then try to address those vulnerabilities from the flames, radiant heat, and embers.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Other questions? Please, Brian Allen.
Thank you for the presentation, Steve. I wanted to ask if there are success stories that you've seen in terms of communities that have been able to make these changes. What action did it take, and how did they maintain their success, and what does the program look like certifying it year after year?
Yeah, so the Wildfire Prepared Neighborhood Program was just launched in March, and we're still very much in kind of a pilot testing phase. We do have one community here in California that was built brand new by KB Home in Escondido that has a provisional designation because they're still in the middle of the development of that community. To date, they haven't been tested in theory by a wildfire. What we do know is in California, we have the California Building Code Chapter 7A. And from the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection damage inspection data that homes that are built to that code have a higher chance of surviving even these high intensity wildfires. But it is variable across from fire to fire because of the nature of the fire itself, and the community has variabilities to it. So we can't put an exact number on how much value it adds. We just know that it adds a significant amount of value.
Thank you. Senator Short.
Thank you so much. So I have the 7th district is a very rural district. While we do have, our towns where houses are closer together, we have a lot of area where, we're in the forests and, ag land and things like that. So I'm kind of wondering, obviously I get the structure protection and your distances, but is there anything particular that you would say we as homeowners in these kind of environments would use versus your really dense urban environment?
So if there's good spacing, when I talked about and Senator, thank you for the question. When I talked about the requirement for the neighborhood program of a distance of 10 feet out to 100 feet, when you start getting further out, it's still necessary to reduce the risk from a wildfire, particularly the embers. And so we should address the materials that the home is made out of to reduce those vulnerabilities from that ember exposure, as well as the surrounding area, so that we don't have a high intensity fire from an accessory dwelling unit or a structure that's nearby, a shed that ignites, exposing that house to that higher intensity fire. So we can address those fuels that surround that particular home.
Thank you. Michael DeLong.
Hi, I'm Michael DeLong from the Consumer Federation of America. Thank you for this presentation. My question is, are there hard facts or statistics about how much someone's insurance premium will go down if, say, they adopt one of these measures versus if they adopt half of them versus if they adopt all the mitigation measures? Is there any data on that?
I don't have any data. My background is in the fire service, so that is not my area of expertise. I would maybe defer you to Kenton Bryan. I don't know if Kenton can answer that question for you or not. But what we do know is on these high intensity fires, that just doing one or two mitigation actions still leaves the home very vulnerable to that wildfire exposure. So we think of it as a systems-based approach to really building resilience to that home and significantly reducing the risk to it.
Thank you. Kenton, I don't know if you want to address that question or if you had a different question you wanted to ask.
I had a different question, but I'll speak to Michael's inquiry
Please.
as well a little bit. And thanks for the question, Michael, and thank you for the presentation, Steve. I think that in the environment that we're in currently, especially as we look at how new the Wildfire Prepared Hope program is, how limited it is being currently rolled out, I guess is the best way to put it. It's a little early to say what kind of discounts. Some states, I think California may have included some mandated discounts for wildfire prepared home. The industry, of course, I'll try to speak for the industry as best I can, is not excited about mandating things for which we haven't seen demonstrated savings yet. So no homes have been saved by wildfire prepared home yet. So, and our ratings, our rates tend to be based, at least in part, not only on what we expect to happen, but what is happening or what has happened. So in the environment that we're in, I think the way the industry looks at it is, as you heard Steve mention in his presentation, we need to look at insurability as being the primary early benefit of wildfire prepared home, and engaging this mitigation work. That's how we bend the curve on availability of insurance. And then as insurers gain confidence that it's a program that works and more homes are saved, then you start to see carriers competing for business, and that results in discounts. So hopefully that sheds a little light on that. And I did want to say, I wanted to ask Steve, this question came up when we were at the burn last week in Oregon. Are these materials that are important to, especially as we talk about retrofitting homes as opposed to building new communities, think about the fence gate, are the materials that are necessary to do mitigation work, as we look at our work here, engaging in mitigation grant programs, are these materials available? Are they at, Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever, the local hardware store, Ace Hardware, in rural areas as well as larger cities? Are they hard to find, these materials, as homeowners look to make these mitigation efforts on their own or through a coordinated effort like Firewise or Wildfire Prepared Home? Thanks.
Yeah, great question. Most of these materials are readily available at like Lowe's and Home Depot, like cement fiberboard, non-combustible siding material is an example. Class A roofing material is available, metal gutters, and so these are for the most part available. The metal fences, there's not as many options right now, but I think as mitigation actions develop out over time, that you'll see the market adjust and additional metal gate or metal fence options come onto the market.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for just one more question. So Corey, over to you.
Thanks. Steve, thank you so much. I found that really fascinating. I Corey Warren with VIP Insurance in Winthrop, Washington, and I'm wondering if there's research being conducted or how this can apply to towns and businesses. So I don't know if you're familiar with Winthrop or like Leavenworth, where these businesses share walls and are not using non-combustible material. Is there research being conducted on that, or can this be applied in those situations?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I am not familiar with that area, but the same concepts basically apply. It's about increasing the resiliency of the exterior of the structure. So it doesn't matter if they're individual structures that are separated by a distance, or if they share a common firewall and they're one bigger building. It's all about the exterior of the structure. How do we make it more resilient to withstand the fire that will inevitably burn around it, and while simultaneously addressing those combustible items that surround that building to remove them, move them further away, remove them entirely, or make them more resilient themselves. And the metal fence, changing a combustible fence, wood fence as an example, to a metal fence is an example of that. And so we address both of those things together. So it really doesn't matter whether it's a single family home or a commercial occupancy or a business or whatever, it's still the same basic concept.
Thank you so much. Deepak, thank you so much for being with us. And as I said, anybody can add comments, questions into the survey that will come out tomorrow. So Steve, we appreciate your time. And I want to transition, thank you. I want to transition to Dr. Lars Powell from the University of Alabama. Over to you.
Well, Kelly, thank you for having me, and I'm pleased to be here. I wanted to open up by agreeing with Commissioner Cooter that Commissioner Fowler is a stand-up guy. He's someone that I really admire. He also signs my paycheck, at least indirectly. So, but I'm not just saying that. He's provided a lot of very important leadership, and it's a good example of what an insurance commissioner can do towards mitigation in a state. Let's see if I can share some slides with you. Let's see if I hit that and share, and then maybe.
We see them, but we don't see them in presentation view yet.
How about there?
Yeah.
No? Yes?
Yeah, you got it. Thank you.
I should, 5 years after COVID, I shouldn't still be pleased when something like this works. I also say I'm excited about the dynamics of this working group. I see a lot of enthusiasm and cooperation. I think that it may not be obvious, but Washington and Alabama have a number of things in common. And one of those is a sort of a similar political climate. Now you're thinking, or the opposite of that. But what I mean is there's one party with a firm majority, and that can be really helpful when you have to do something like this. But putting in a mitigation program, surprisingly, is not a very easy political lift. So having the numbers on your side and having people rowing in the same direction can be really important. So again, my pleasure to speak with you, and I'm going to share a few things. I'm going to start with a very general outlook on loss mitigation as it pertains to insurance, and go into some of the specifics of what we've done in Alabama, and I'll try to relate that to what could go on in Washington, knowing that every state is not the same and we don't exactly face the same perils, but I think we've seen a lot of success, and a lot of that was driven by necessity. So Alabama is a relatively small state. In case you don't know where it is, we've got about 39 miles of coastline in the Gulf of America, and we've seen the most expensive tornado in the history of tornadoes. At least it was in 2011 when it hit, and it dug about a half-mile wide ditch between Tuscaloosa and Birmingham and did $8 billion worth of damage. We've had hurricanes for as long as history goes back. Most recently, Hurricane Sally affected the coast of Alabama, but Hurricane Ivan and Katrina were both storms that flattened a number of houses in Mobile and Baldwin counties, which are our two coastal counties in Alabama. Another thing that made us have to think about this a little harder than some other states is there's 4.9 million people living in Alabama. And when you see problems like this in California or Texas or Florida, they have a little bit more leverage. We'll take the 55 million people in California, and you can no longer have their auto insurance if you don't write their homeowners insurance. And we're seeing that doesn't even work out really all that great. But in Alabama, if we say, hey, if you don't write these houses on the coast, you can't do anything else here, they just say, okay, bye. It was nice knowing you. We'll write your neighbor states and you're a rounding error in our profit and loss statement. So we didn't have the opportunity to do two of the most tried and true approaches, the first of which I like to call the ostrich. And that is where the state says, oh, we don't think this will ever happen again. Yeah, we've had $10 billion wildfires in California 2 years in a row, 2017 and 18, but it's probably not going to happen again. And here we are in 25, and there's the Palisades. You can't just say, well, we hope this doesn't happen anymore and it won't be a problem again. That didn't work out. That doesn't work well for ostriches, nor does it work in very many things at all, but it is human nature. We don't want to deal with hard things, and especially when they're hard and expensive things that you just spent your life savings on, like a big house. It's not a politically popular thing to do, to tell people, well, you should have built that house a little bit better. Backing up for a second, none of these are insurance problems. The insurance mechanism across the country, when allowed to, works very, very well. It's very competitive. What we have are a how you build your house problem and a where you build your house problem. And you feel the pain in your insurance premiums when they go up. And specifically in our case, it was after Hurricane Katrina and Ivan did so much damage in the early 2000 aughts. And I think a lot of companies didn't even know how many policies they wrote along the Gulf Coast. And so all of a sudden they're like, whoa, we just had $80 billion of losses for hurricanes in 14 months. We need to do something. And we look around and say, well, what's the building code? Building code? Well, we have a building code. We're the free state of Alabama. And so, well, no wonder all the houses blew over. And so we knew that that wasn't going to work. The other strategy you find across states is what I like to call the King Canute. Now, King Canute was, I believe, around 800 or 900 AD, a Viking ruler over England and the UK, and known widely to be probably the most effective political operator in history. And he was so powerful that his people said, we're going to carry your throne down to the ocean, and we want you to tell the tide not to come in. Just tell it to stay out, and we bet it will obey you. Well, the king got wet that day. It didn't work very well, just like it doesn't work very well when a heavy-handed regulator tries to say, we won't let you charge an adequate premium for insurance. And so that also wasn't available to Alabama because, again, we don't have these other kickers to throw in, like, hey, you can write all this life insurance. Life insurance in Alabamians isn't what it could be, right? There's not as much longevity as some other places. So we had to do something different, and we looked around, and what we realized is we were never going to fix this insurance problem until we addressed what happens after the storm to the economy and to the built environment. And what we found was IBHS, and they were a very different operation back then. They were selling the Fortified for Safer Living house, which we have, I think, 20 of in Alabama, and they've held up very well to the storm since then, but they were pretty expensive. Now with the Fortified Roof, Silver, and Gold, we've found more cost-effective ways, but we've also done some things like the Alabama Resilience Council, which is co-chaired by our insurance commissioner, Mark Fowler, and our emergency management director, Jeff Smitherman. And it involves, I think, 12 or 16 different state agencies. And they get together, they talk about these risks and resources and where they overlap. We've got forestry there. We've got natural resources. Some states have different names for different things, but at the very first meeting, we knew of a municipality that had a water system that was failing, and the emergency management had about 30 or 40% of the money they needed to replace it. But obviously you can't replace it with 30 or 40%. They needed $7 million more. And Natural Resources, I believe it was, said, oh, we actually have a program that can pay that other $7 million. So I feel like just that very first meeting was worth having. So if you haven't gotten your state together to talk about resilience, it is well worth doing. But we did some other things too. I also want to brag on Smart Home America, is a nonprofit that's headquartered here. If you haven't interacted with them yet, they go to almost every state. They've been instrumental in getting some of the mitigation work done in Louisiana and I know they've been in Arkansas a lot lately. They've also been in Minnesota and Iowa, so all over the country. Not because they're headquartered in Alabama does not mean they don't work everywhere, and they do a really good job. So yeah, fortified is the first thing I want to talk about. I won't spend too much time on the details except to say, and hearing the previous presentation, I think this is their MO now. Is I've actually built one of these houses for Habitat for Humanity. All of our Habitat houses are built in Alabama to a fortified standard so that they're more affordable. And it's very simple. If I can do it, I like to think that most other people can, but everybody in my office went down there and did it. So I was actually up on a roof putting this tape on the seams. And what happens if you've got, so at a certain wind speed, it starts, I think, around 30 or 40 miles an hour, the shingles start to blow off a roof. And if you haven't put this tape that seals the roof deck, then your house becomes a big bucket and it just fills up with water because water can get through where the shingles were. So you put this tape on the roof deck. And then there's these ring shank nails that are really hard to pull out. They hold really well, and they keep the roof decking attached to the rafters. And there's this special thing you do over on the other side. You see a guy installing, it's a special glue or mastic around the drip edge, which is just the edge of the roof and those shingles. And it keeps that first row of shingles from blowing off and taking the next rows with them. This isn't, as we say in Alabama, this is not rocket surgery. It's pretty straightforward things. And our volume builders at the coast tell us that they can do this for an additional less than 1% compared to building to the 2021 IRC, which is, I think, the most recent code we've adopted. We issued, I say we, the commissioner, at this time it was Commissioner Ridling, issued these fortified mitigation discounts that are benchmarks for insurance companies. Now, if they can show why these don't match their book of business, which could happen, especially if you're especially serving a population of older homes or homes with deferred maintenance, then some of these features aren't as effective. But to date, we haven't had anyone submit an actuarial study saying that they can't use these discounts. And we've actually expanded it to be separate by two different perils. The wind and hail versus hurricane. So inland wind and hail versus coastal hurricane. But we've got these benchmark discounts. And the last I heard is that some of the companies even give higher discounts than this voluntarily because they want to be competitive. We also have the Strength in Alabama Homes program, used to be run by Brian Powell, who is not my cousin, but a lot of people ask if we're related, and really we don't know. We just learned that our dads were born in the same town in North Carolina, so there's actually a chance of that. And now Travis Taylor is in charge of the Strength in Alabama Homes project since Brian Powell went to work with the NAIC. But it's our grant program that's to date spent $86 million retrofitting 8,700 houses to the fortified roof roof designation. And that does several things. The first thing it does is it creates a supply of contractors. They say, oh, there's going to be money for people to do this, then we're going to learn how to do it. And we've got some very preliminary results looking at the data from the grant program that the contractors who bid on these houses then turn around and do the fortified roofs outside of the grant program, and they actually sell it to their customers saying, this only costs a little bit more, but it's a lot better and you save on your insurance. So these 8,700 fortified homes are less than 20%. I think we're up to 54,000 fortified homes in Alabama. If you look at this chart, and this is just your basic Excel spreadsheet. I don't know why it defaults to Auburn football colors. I didn't do that. I could probably get fired if somebody found out. But the blue line is the number of fortified designations in Alabama, and the orange line is the number in the rest of the country. So we are good at something other than college football, and that is building fortified houses. So these 50-something thousand fortified homes are in our primarily in our two coastal counties that have a total of about 210,000 single-family homes. So we're looking at more than 20% of our of the population, or the single-family houses in those two coastal counties, are fortified now, and it's starting to make a big difference in the availability of insurance. But the study that we're talking about recently is this one on Hurricane Sally that we have been wanting to do this. Now, I'm kind of like a weatherman in that my job becomes more interesting when there's a bad storm, but we don't pray for them or wish for them to happen, even though they do help us out professionally. We had Hurricane Sally it came on shore in Gulf Shores, Alabama on September 16th, 2020. Is a strong Category 2 hurricane. There were some gusts up to 125 to 130 miles per hour. I don't remember how many knots that is, but they usually report that in nautical miles per hour. So it was a very strong and slow moving, heavy rain Category 2 hurricane. And what was important about it is the first hurricane to hit a critical mass. These little brown and gold dots are the fortified designations in Alabama at the time that this struck. There were 17,000 fortified homes in Alabama when Hurricane Sally hit. So it's the first chance to test how well it worked. Now, we've just released this report. The Department of Insurance did a data call, and they contracted with us to do the analysis. You can scan this QR code and download the paper, and we are counting how many times it gets downloaded, so feel free to download it early and often. But all this work is described in there. But what we found is that the fortified works, and this is just your straight. All we're controlling for here is the wind speed. Renaissance Re was kind enough to give us some very granular data on where wind speeds were, how fast, and it did differ quite a bit across the storm zone. And this is just a straight comparison of the blue line are the conventional homes, the brown or reddish brown is the fortified roof, and the gold line is fortified gold. And you can see there's some more details there at the bottom. Okay, I'm probably not going to run out of time, but I talk kind of slow, and here I go off on a tangent. Anyways, the fortified works. But something that this has in common with Wildfire is that this fortified the fortified hurricane isn't made to deal with trees falling on your house. So that's still a problem. If there's a tree close enough to fall on your house and big enough to do damage, then that's not a fortified thing. Now, the picture I just showed you included I believe 46% of the claims in Hurricane Sally were from trees falling on houses that fortified can't really do anything about. So there's one thing we learned is that you need to cut those trees down while they're small. Hurricane Helene went through where my parents live, and they had 4 big, old, unhealthy pine trees fall on their house. And when I was growing up and living there, I probably could have run over those trees with a lawnmower if I had known to do that. So training people that a pine tree is just a really big weed and should be taken out. Now, it's fine to have trees that aren't tall enough to fall on your house, but you've got to plan for that because they do continue to grow. Getting the trees so they can't fall on your house is important. I think that's also important for wildfire mitigation. It's something we're gonna have to train people to do because a lot of people like trees. I was talking about this same point with the Forestry Commission and the Environmental Commission. They're like, what do you mean we're going to cut down trees? Well, let's just don't let them fall on our house during a hurricane. That they make a good windbreak as long as they're far enough away. So these are the claims by tree status, and something you can see is that. So these are the tree claims. These are the non-tree claims, and where they are, it faces substantially different exposure. You don't have a lot of tree claims on the beach because you don't have a lot of trees on the beach. And so most of the claims there are not tree claims. So if we get rid of the tree claims in our sample, you see that this is almost a perfect picture of what the engineers at IBHS or any university that does this research would tell you how it's supposed to perform. That once you get over about 120 miles per hour, which is about 104 knots, which is in this last category, that you start seeing structural damage. So before that, around 65, 70, you start to see shingles come off of roofs and then water getting in. It happens more, and then you start seeing structural damage in the last part, except for the fortified gold houses. And that's the difference between fortified roof and fortified gold, is that fortified gold is I like to say it's nailed to the floor, but it's not just nailed, you know, there's big bolts and stuff. So this performed exactly as the models and the research said it was going to, and that gives us a lot more confidence in the models. It's still the models that we use to set the benchmark discounts or any discounts. And I may have mentioned that we've got a white paper with the Center for Insurance Policy Research at NAIC on how to calculate these discounts that should be coming out this month. It's important that you can't give discounts to policies that already have inadequate premiums. That if the insurance companies are already giving these discounts, then it doesn't make sense to give them again. So you've got to make sure that you've got adequate premiums to begin with. We had that in Alabama, and that was the main reason why we were able to pass the legislation to get the benchmark discounts. We also, the last thing I'll go over is the difference between code enforcement and fortified. So fortified has their own evaluators, and I apologize, I've snuck into the back of a ballroom in the Embassy Suites in Sacramento because it was the only quiet place here where I could give a presentation, and I'm afraid they might be about to come in here and have an event. So if they throw me out, I'll just try to finish really quickly. The code houses are houses that are built to a building code that is identical to the fortified requirements. The blue dots are fortified gold, and the red dots are fortified roof. And then over on this side, it's the same map, the same picture, but it's the houses that are built to the fortified gold and fortified roof. And of course, the fortified has IBHS evaluators that come and look at every time that you're supposed to evaluate this to make sure it's done right. We've got perhaps a number of code officials that, as we say, don't ever get out of the truck if you bring them a coffee. So the fortified evaluators don't get paid to do that. They get paid by the inspection, and everybody knows exactly who inspected that house. So when this graph compares the code to the fortified, and what we see is for the fortified gold, whether it's code or IBHS, they perform almost identical. But the fortified roof, right? The fortified roof is down here right next to the fortified gold. But this is the houses that were inspected by code inspectors and should have been identical to these houses that are the fortified roof. But look, they were almost as bad as the conventional houses. So we think it's important that you have a very robust system of evaluating and inspecting these houses when you have a program like this, and that the IBHS inspectors have done a great job. This just shows our counterfactual. If we had started doing this in the 1960s or the 1980s instead of the 2010s and 2020s, we would have had all of our houses, because it takes a long time for the housing stock to turn over. A roof might last 20 to 40 years. So if all the houses had been fortified gold, then the amount saved on deductibles, the policyholders would have saved about 65% of what they paid on deductibles, which is more than $30 million just in this small area of our study. And the insurers would have saved on losses 75%, which is about $113 million out of 149. So really big savings would have happened if we get all these houses to be insured, and you'd never get the last one until you get the first one. So with that, thank you for your time. Here's the QR code again, in case you didn't get it the first time, or if you want to use the website there at the Alabama Department of Insurance. But I'm happy to answer any questions, and it is my pleasure to give the presentation.
Thank you. We have a few minutes if anyone has a question. Corin, over to you.
Yeah, hopefully my sound will work. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
good.
Sorry, we couldn't hear you earlier.
So how with the grants, how did you allocate grants and make sure that only those homeowners that needed to, I mean, if you weren't in a hurricane area, how did you prevent those folks from getting grants?
Great question. The grants are only available. Actually, we're expanding it this year to 3 additional counties. Right now, they're only available in our 2 hurricane-prone counties, the 2 coastal counties of Mobile and Baldwin. We're spreading it out to Jefferson County, which is Birmingham, and Tuscaloosa County for the fortified high wind and hail to do some of the retrofits there, and then also I think it's Escambia County, which is adjacent to the coast. But it's the grant program gets these things started and lets people know that it's possible to do. And it's kind of like when Taylor Swift tickets go on sale, when they're about to open up to the random draw. They said last time there was over 150,000 people online logged in waiting to hit go at midnight when they became available. So everybody knows about it. You have to meet the eligibility requirements. We chose, I'm not saying we, when I say we, I mean the legislature chose not to have any requirements for like means testing, that we just want to get some fortified houses out there. Some other states have tried to use some means testing, and it's just hard unless you can pay the whole thing for the amount of the grant. Then lower income places really struggle to come up with their part of the money. We've done several pilot programs. We actually created an algorithm that identifies houses from Google Street View that are that would be able to retrofit the roof for less than $10,000. So we went with Habitat for Humanity and approached those houses. We've done about 400 or 500 of those in Alabama through the Strength in Alabama Homes program. Not all of them are coastal. We did, I think, 100 in Tuscaloosa County, 100 in the inner city of Birmingham. And those have been some of the, you feel really good about yourself when you go fix somebody's house. Now, one person said, when it rains, it doesn't rain inside anymore. And that's very satisfying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kenton.
Thanks for that presentation, Lars. I'm wondering if your research, how you would see the research that you've done on the impact of the fortified roof program in Alabama, and compare that to what's really a different risk, which to put it most plainly, if somebody fortifies their roof in Alabama, they've protected their roof, no impact on their neighbors. If somebody does all the work in the wildfire space, they've done some good work to protect their home. If their neighbors don't do it, their house can still burn down. Do you have any thoughts on what you would predict to be the benefits of individual home versus larger scale community resilience mitigation work?
So it's always best to put municipal golf courses around each neighborhood, in my opinion, because that makes it less expensive for the greens fee. But so those good fire breaks are really important. But what you see, if you look back to Hurricane Michael, there was that one kind of bionic house that was still standing after everything else blew over. But if you look really closely, the house right behind it was still standing too. And that's because that big fortified house stood as a windbreak in front of it. And so it didn't get as much wind either. And a few of the other houses behind there didn't have as much damage, and the rest were all just leveled. And so that works both ways. If you don't fortify your house, then your soffit's going to come off and it's going to go through your neighbor's window, and it's going to make the pressure unequal and bust out their garage door or whatever it is. So communities should really feel a sense of community around this. I still contend that one of the best things you can do is have some way to objectively show your neighbors that your house is fortified with some sort of medallion on the front, like a fire mark, like they used to have for the early insurance stuff. It was so the fire department knew they were going to get paid to put out a fire at your house. But this would just be to make your neighbors jealous, because that's really what makes people do things in the real world. You do things to your house so that it looks better than your neighbor's house. And if you've got to spend an extra $2,000 on your roof to have a fortified mark on the front of your house, I think you would do that. I think you'd find that happening a lot. So, but yes, I think there are some real similarities. If your house is fortified fire-wise, does it keep your neighbor's house from burning? Yes, but if their house isn't, would it potentially burn yours? Again, yes. So the other thing about fire is it requires maintenance. That defensible space is only there until you order a quart of firewood in the winter and you're like, oh, no, 10 feet's a long way to walk when you've got to feed the fire. Just set it right there on the porch. And now you've got a fortified Firewise house that's got 2 cords of firewood stacked next to it. And so it's really not anymore. So some way to maintain or inspect on a regular basis those houses. I think there's a lot of ways you can do that with AI and drones or satellites or overhead flights. I know nobody wants to hear that because of privacy issues, but it's going to require some creativity and some way to inspect for those to be consistently mitigated.
Thank you so much. Thanks for all the questions, and thank you, Dr. Larthall, for your presentation. Let me say a big thank you to all of our presenters, the commissioners, their teams, our elected officials, and working group and ex officio members, and all of you that are listening. We really appreciate you being here today. Reminder that our next meeting is July 8th, and there is a link to register. Deanne is going to put that into the chat if you have not yet registered. Just because you registered for today, you do still need to register for the next meeting. And as shared earlier, surveys are in place as a way for you to offer your input and your questions. So you will receive a link tomorrow if you are a working group member, and you can find it on the website if you are not a working group member, and we would still love to get your input. Deanne is also going to put the website one more time into the chat in case you have, if you haven't been there and you would like to. Robin, what else?
Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge David Fort and all the work that he did in getting this organized, reaching out to all these individuals. There's just a lot of thought put into getting, great subject matter experts to inform this group. So David, thank you for all the work. He's been, just hitting it really hard and doing a lot of work. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And you took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you to David, Lauren Burns, Lauren Torgensen, everybody on that team as well. So we will wrap up our meeting. Deanne put the link into chat if you haven't registered for next week's meeting, and also if you haven't been yet to the website. David, is there anything else from your side before we wrap up our meeting tonight? Oh, you're on mute though.
No, thank you so much. Great work today.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you next week. Have a great rest of your day.